Welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stinn, holder of the heaviest equipped squat and total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Center and co-owner of Inner Strength Products. Steve Cassioli, IPF world record holder and medalist, the third strongest classic lifter in Canadian history, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world team coach and world bench press medalist, owner of PursuitOfStrength.com, a site dedicated to coaching and education for powerlifters. Today's episode starts right now.
Season 2 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by LVD Fitness. LVD Fitness is a powerlifting apparel brand that donates 1 month of clean water to a child in need for every item sold. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook at LVD Fitness to join the movement.
I think after you've been in the sport for a while, if you want to really become the best, you have to start measuring as many things as you can. So like I have a sleep tracking app now, sleep cycle that I use. Like I weigh and measure my food. Like I'm always trying to optimize. We do a lot of, speed pulls with deadlifts because I'm doing a ton of pulling volume already. So we don't need to push the weight super heavy. We're doing some pause work too, so that I can work on positioning in the sumo deadlift. Because I don't think my problem there is really strength. It's just technical. I need to learn that movement better. So I think I see myself as kind of a science experiment, and that's kind of how I do everything. Whether it's nutrition, whatever it is, if you just control something, and you have some sort of hypothesis and you just try to keep some stuff the same but change other things and see what happens. So that's kind of how my training works. And
hello and welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the handsome podcasting version. Just kidding, that's every single week with your co-hosts, Steve Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Avi Silverberg. And this week we have a fantastic guest who joined us, Brittney Bergen, who just recently placed third at our CPU National Championships in a very competitive category. And Ryan is actually her coach. Ryan, tell us a little bit more about Brittney.
Well, like you said, she competed this year at Nationals in 57 kilos and placed third behind Maria and Jess. So definitely one of the most competitive classes. I mean, not that there's any giveaway classes at Nationals, but she's only been doing powerlifting for just a little, about 2 years maybe. So I started coaching her last year, just doing her bench program to start. And she's a multi-sport athlete. She's competed highly in weightlifting and also done quite a bit of crossfitting, and that's how she actually got into strength sports. So, she hasn't been in the sports a long time, but definitely seeing good success in both of them in a short period of time.
And Steve, what did we actually get into? What were some of the topics that we covered with Brittney? Some actually fascinating information with her training program and such.
Yeah, so just what her program looks like. So she's multi-sport athlete, right? So how she trains for weightlifting, powerlifting, and CrossFit in general, how she ties all the three of those into her program, and being successful as an athlete in all three of those. Also, a few other things about her business, Idealistic Isabel. And then some pretty cool stuff about structuring her program around the lines of her menstrual cycle and stuff, which is found pretty interesting.
So some really cool, interesting, unique information and a great podcast for you. But before we roll into that, we're going to do our coast-to-coast bi-weekly powerlifting wrap-up. What do you got for us, buddy?
All right, so I'm going to be covering the hashtag Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. So
don't forget to hashtag the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, right, Steve?
Yeah,
that's
Taylor's
right.
Bad Get.
All right, so number 1, we have Chanel Gardner hitting a 235-pound squat for 4 reps. We also have Cam Hughes exerting exerting the upper extremities with the 305-pound bench press for 6 reps, #cardio. And also Shane Smart hitting a 170-kilo bench for 5, 2-count pause. What do you
Holy
have for us,
cow,
Ryan?
Shane Martin, you stud from Alberta. My boy, Shane Martin.
What?
Ryan,
What do
what
I
do you
have?
got for us? What do you got?
So everyone knows that my wife and myself run Inner Strength Products, and recently we've formed SPD Canada, which is going to allow us to hopefully get SPD products into a gym near you somewhere. We're going to be selling directly to retailers so that we can have some retail outlets across the country, hopefully allowing the high quality SPD products to be sold a little bit closer to home for most people. So along with the sale to distributors across the country, we're also going to be putting together some sponsored athletes and some sponsored teams, including none other than Steve Cassioli, who is on Team SPD Canada, along with Kelly Branton. And I'll be putting another announcement today. I guess this will actually be about 5 days in the past, so I'll announce that the third person on the team is Maria Hitti from Newfoundland. So all very excellent athletes and excellent ambassadors for the sport. So we're hoping to grow a good team under the SPD Canada flag.
One of the things that I love about SPD, Ryan, is that they are one of the first, actually the first sponsors in Canada to come out and say, hey, we're going to sponsor the Canadian Powerlifting National Team, and they're giving away some not only some free swag to our open athletes, but some full kits to our open athletes, but they are also going to be giving away some prize money, cash, to athletes who medal at the World Championships. So some great incentives from SPD.
Yeah, I think the SPD teams, the SPD nations, as they did last year, I think they had a dozen countries or so under their flag, and this year we also have it on board. Canada will have custom singlets, custom T-shirts, all customized for Canada, given to the open team competing in Texas, and then we also provide them to anyone else competing internationally. We did that on our side at a heavily discounted rate, so that hopefully most people competing internationally this year can wear pretty cool custom Canadian gear. And what do you have for us, Abby?
This week I'm going to talk about a venture that I started with a friend of mine, Mike McDonald. Both him and I co-founded a business called MyStrengthBook.com, and what it is, it's a web application that allows powerlifting athletes to build workouts, plan training programs, and assess their training metrics so that their training is very specific to your training style, your training needs, and obviously the whole goal of tracking and analyzing your training metrics is to help you build more effective workouts and training programs that lead to better performance. So we haven't really set a launch date. We have a beta version that we're going to be releasing right after we come back from the World Championships in June, and we're going to be releasing that beta version to a select group of individuals. So if you want to be on the beta testing list, certainly go to mystrengthbook.com and sign up just with using your email, and you'll be updated on when we actually are releasing that. And not only that, that'll get you a free trial to use the software and give us some feedback so we can continue to develop this web app for you. It's only for powerlifters. It's very powerlifting specific. Everything from the metrics that are tracked to the exercises that are being the exercises that you're able to program, all the variations and all the nuances of the sport. So definitely something to watch out for, something that I'm really excited to kind of bring to powerlifting. And yeah, go to mystrengthbook.com. You can sign up for, like I said, a free trial when we launch, and to get on our beta testing list.
So 2 weeks ago on the podcast, we had Bryce Krawchuk from Calgary Barbell, and Bryce was very gracious to offer a free snapback hat to one of our listeners. So we did a draw for that, and the winner for that is Justin Kozak. I think I'm saying that right. I hope I'm saying that right. I think he's actually one of your athletes, isn't he, Avi?
He's one of my athletes. Good
Does
guy.
that-
He's actually going to be competing next weekend. So good luck to you, Justin, and congrats on your new Calgary Barbell snapback hat.
So we'll get you in touch with Bryce and get that lined up.
And without further ado, we have a great conversation with Brittney Bergen.
Brittney.
And here we go. This week on the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, we got Brittney Bergen sitting down with us. And Brittney is a well-known, famous podcaster herself. So how do you feel being on the opposite end of the mic here, Brittney?
I'm excited to be. I think it is a little more nerve-wracking to be the guest. Like at the host, you kind of get to put all the pressure on the guest and ask them all the questions. So it's going to be interesting to be at the other end of things, but I'm excited to be here. I think you guys have something really awesome going on, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
I first kind of sat down and talked with Brittney at Nationals this year, and I didn't kind of put two and two together with your podcast. It's called Project Possible, and you have some really interesting guests that come on, and a lot from the world of CrossFit, but some quite high-level CrossFitters and quite some big names, and it sounds like a very successful podcast. How did you get into podcasting? How did you get into that sort of realm?
Yeah, so my friend Brendan Kozak, he's the owner of CrossFit Villains in Regina. I think he just saw my blogs, he saw some of the things I'm doing, and he kind of obviously I share quite a bit of myself and my values and everything like that on social media, and he just saw all that, and he reached out to me and he said, I feel like you have a pretty entrepreneurial mindset. He's like, these are the things I want the podcast to be about. Basically, it's about sharing the idea that anything is possible for anyone who wants to make something happen. So basically, we get people who are super successful at whatever they want to do, and we share their stories, their tips, their tricks, everything like that to show that really everybody isn't that much different from them. It's just a matter of the practices, habits, and different things that you implement in your life. So yeah, he just reached out to me and asked if it would be something that I was interested in, and it really aligned with my views, with my blog, with everything like that. So I said, of course, and we went from there. And yeah, we've had some really awesome guests. We had Ryan on the show once with Rhea. That was really fun. We've had lots of top CrossFit athletes like your friend Lucas Parker. We've had Brooke Entz. We've had Alex Parker. We've had lots of people outside the CrossFit world too, lots of top entrepreneurs. We just had Kelly Starrett from Mobility WOD, the guys who started up ROM WOD. We've got some other really cool guests coming along. So yeah, it's been really awesome, and it's been amazing. One of my favorite shows was with Christmas Abbott. She's one of my huge heroes, and it's just really cool. It was like a dream come true to have her on there, and just talking with her, even, it was amazing how much we had in common, and I think it just really brought it together. The whole thing we're trying to do with the show is anything's possible for you. You're not that different than your heroes. So
you mentioned that one of the show's premise is essentially those practices and habits that actually allow you to succeed at whatever you're doing, whether it's business or whether it's sport and stuff like that. And I do want to kind of get into your background and some of your practices and habits, because you actually got into powerlifting fairly recently, and you've seen a ton of success competing in one of the more competitive weight classes at the national level, the 57-kilo women's class, open class, and you've just seen a ton of success. So can you actually tell us a little bit about, before we get into that, how you actually got into the sport and how you actually have kind of navigated your way through and progressed?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to share that. So I got into powerlifting through CrossFit. So I was actually doing a bikini competition at the time. I was getting ready for that. I did this bikini competition. I got third place in it, and I was devastated because I thought I should have won. So I remember just crying in this change room after this bikini competition. And I had actually recently talked to one of my friends, and she was sharing all of Facebook posts of her laying on the floor after these CrossFit workouts, and I was like, what is this chick doing? And we talked about it a bit, and she asked me about how I was training, and I asked her about how she was training, and I was like, that sounds so much more fun. She had no clue what she was going to do every day, just showed up at the gym, and it was something completely different. And I was coming from this idea of sort of that bodybuilding background of I'm doing my leg day the same every week, doing my upper body stuff the same every week, and so that was so exciting. So I got into that, but she knew that one of my main goals was to get really strong. And so she actually put me on like the Wendler 531 program right at the beginning of my CrossFit programming. So she met me at my sister's gym one day, took me through a workout. I was like, this was really fun. And then she started emailing me my workouts. So I was up north teaching in Canoe Lake, teaching high school science. And so I would go to the school gym and just like use kind of whatever they had for equipment. And it wasn't the best equipment or best setup for sure, but I got by. And then I got really into it. So so I bought a whole bunch of equipment. I spent like $5,000 from Rogue and like slowly acquired all these different things and built my basement gym up. So I'd be posting my videos on Instagram and stuff. I'm just like lifting in my basement and yeah. So I thought I was doing CrossFit, but I didn't realize how much powerlifting I was doing at the time. And then I would just go to different CrossFit gyms traveling around, and I realized like I'm as strong or stronger than a lot of these girls, and a lot of them are a lot bigger than me. Maybe I should look at like, I'm sure there's some kind of records in some of these lifts. So lots of people have that story where they like get on their computer and look up the provincial record. So that's exactly what I did. I looked up the provincial deadlift record because I knew I had a strong deadlift. And I was about a 63 at the time. So I did my first meet as a 63 kilogram lifter. I reached out to, I emailed 306, CrossFit 306, Reebok there in Saskatoon, and Mark Morris got back to me right away. And so
yeah, for those of you who don't know, Mark is also a coach in powerlifting. He is actually joining Ryan and myself on the world team this year as coaches. So a very, very good person to reach out to.
Yeah. So Mark was like incredibly helpful. I dropped into his powerlifting class at that CrossFit gym there, and he was like, yeah, you're really strong, gave me a couple tips. So I showed up to my first meet like not that long after that. Had no clue what I was doing, didn't have a coach. Like Mark was busy that day, so I just like did all my numbers myself, and like everybody was like, who is this girl? And I did like all my lifts in my Olympic weightlifting shoes. So I pulled my first 300-pound deadlift with like a big heel on my shoe. I was like, do you always deadlift in those shoes? I was like, I don't know any better. I trained in my basement by myself. So that's how I got through CrossFit.
I always find like I'm always at meets now. Like every meet I go to, I'm always just like, who is this chick? Like there's always just some like really, really strong lifters on the women's side who just completely blow me away. And it's like they have very similar stories to you, where it's just like you have no idea who they are. It's so unpredictable. You see the names on the entry list, and they're coming out there and deadlifting 300 or sometimes even more, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and it's a really exciting thing that it's growing so much. And yeah, you can have these women coming from nowhere and doing really cool things. So I'm excited to see what continues to happen in the next little while.
Yeah, that's awesome, Brittney. Can you tell some of your highlights and memorable moments over the past couple years that you've been training?
Yeah, so memorable moments, I think one of them would have been that very first meet that I did at Reebok CrossFit 306. And like I said, that was the first time I ever pulled 300 pounds. And I remember like... And
when was that, Brittney? Sorry.
That would have been like about 2 years ago, I guess. I don't remember the exact date, but I just remember being there, and everyone was like so nice and welcoming and friendly. And I remember being in the back and being like, I was like so tired before deadlifts, and I never experienced that before because it was my first meet. And I messaged my friend who was my CrossFit coach, and I was like, I don't think I have this in me. Like, I don't think I'm going to get this. I don't think I'm going to join the 300-pound club today and stuff. And she's like, yes, you are. She's like, get that out of your head. She's like, eat something and go out there and like just pull that bar. And I just remember like I just took that to my head, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like I gotta quit being a wimp. I'm just gonna go do this. And I did it, and it was like super hard, but it was really exciting. So that was a memorable moment. Besides that, like I feel like deadlifts are always memorable moments. One of my favorite moments was at my first nationals. Stin actually ended up coaching me at that meet. So Mark Morris was doing some of my programming before that meet, but he couldn't help me because he had to help Amy in the weight class right after me, his fiance. So Ryan helped me, and so did Ryan Fowler. And I remember it was like before the third deadlift, like I did like not a very good shot at the podium, but I let both the Ryans decide what they were going to put on the bar for that third deadlift. And I just had my headphones in, and I had no idea what was going to be on the bar before I went out there. And I remember, like, I pulled my headphones out, and Stin was just like, he's just like, pull that bar, and even if you pass out, keep pulling. And so I went out there, no idea what's on the bar. Everybody else in the crowd knew it was like a 160 kg deadlift, and I just jumped from 142.5. And so I remember talking to Amy after, actually, and she's like, I didn't even think you were going to break the floor. But I went out there, and I just, like, pulled as hard as I could, and I got it to my knees, and I couldn't get it any further than that. But that was a really exciting moment, and that's when I think I realized, like, I could actually be really good at powerlifting. And I remember Aaron Ziffel coming up to me after that, and he's just like, you got to quit that CrossFit bullshit, and you would be really good at this. So that was another really memorable moment. And then, of course, like, this Nationals was super memorable as well, just, like, feeling like I was, like, among the best lifters instead of just, like, this girl who just showed up, and, like, being able to talk to everyone and seeing how nice everyone is, even at the highest level. I'd say that was memorable, too.
It's super interesting to hear hear that one of your memorable moments is actually a lift where you failed a lift. I don't think a lot of people actually would put that into a category that would be memorable, but it sounds like you actually got a lot out of that experience, just in terms of like your development in the sport, your mentality, and how you approach lifts. So that's really, really cool. How did you actually get in touch with Ryan? Because I know you said that you first started working with Mark Morris, but where did Ryan Stinn come along in the picture? Because he's now your coach, and he was coaching you leading up to Nationals this year, where you had a fantastic performance. You came third behind Maria T. and Jessica Benedito, who were the top two Wilks scoring female athletes out of all the women. So in the most competitive category, you placed third. How did you actually hook up with Ryan, and what was sort of the process leading up to Nationals where you had that success?
Yeah, thanks, first of all. And Jessica and Maria are, like, super amazing, like, as people and not just as athletes. So it was amazing to chat with them a bit at Nationals and even chat with them. Like, we've had small just social media conversations since then, and it's really cool how you can encourage different athletes that some people might think it wouldn't be an encouraging atmosphere, but I think it really is. And yeah, so how and I got in touch, I asked Mark just who he thought would be able to help me, and he's like, I was talking with Rhea actually a bit about my weight cut, because I cut weight a few times, but, you know, just like the first few times you do it, you kind of want that moral support of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to make this? And so I was chatting with Rhea about that, and I asked if Rhea could help me, and she's like, oh yeah, someone will be able to help you for sure. So that someone ended up being Ryan, well, both Ryans. And then I just, I really liked, I worked with Ryan that day, so I was following actually before that the Path to the Podium program from Reebok CrossFit 306, which Mark was doing the bench press programming and the squats and the deadlifts. So, like, he had a powerlifting aspect, and then Jason Kane was doing the CrossFit part. And then after that, I started following the Muscle Gain Challenge by Barbell Shrugged. And I would have.
And this was so just for timeline here, Brittney. Like, this was about a year. Like, was this a year ago, 2 years ago, or was this leading up to Nationals where you were doing?
This was leading up to my very first Nationals.
Yeah. So, okay, so your first Nationals was actually in 2015 in Newfoundland. So leading up to that Nationals, you were actually doing some CrossFitting as well within your programming.
Oh yeah, I was doing CrossFit. Like, I've been doing CrossFit even until this Nationals. I was doing quite a bit of CrossFit until I hurt my thumb, and then I was like, I guess I'm just going to do powerlifting. So yeah, that's how I got in touch with Stin. And then I asked Ryan if he would do my bench press programming after that. So I continued to follow that Barbell Muscle Gain Challenge, which is a pretty high volume Olympic weightlifting program. And I knew, like, I didn't deadlift at all training for my first Nationals. Like, if I did, it was in a conditioning mode, and I had like 3 rounds of 15 deadlifts or something like that. So I didn't do any deadlift training. I did a lot of heavy squats. And I knew that made my deadlift go up. So I asked him if he would just program bench for me. And I saw a really big increase in my bench in like 3 months. I added like 7.5 kilos to my bench before I went and did my next meet with Stin. And so the meet I did after that, I was like, I should probably do a real peak for this meet. That was Westerns. So I got Stin to do that for me. So I actually like did squats, deadlift, bench, and that was my first time. Westerns was my first time training all 3 lifts specifically. And
that's when I actually like kind of saw you in person and was just like, holy crap, who is this sort of thing? And I turned to Ryan because I saw Ryan coaching you at Westerns in 2015, and I was just like, who is this? And he's just like, that's Brittney Bergen. And I'm just like, I'm like, she's gonna make a run for the podium this year, for nationals, and he was just like, yeah.
Yeah, so that was my first time ever, like, just training powerlifting, so like 6 or 7 weeks or whatever we did for that meet. And then after that, I wanted to do more weightlifting. Like, I went back to the muscle gain challenge for a bit, but I ended up hurting my thumb. Like, I do this weird thing when I catch my cleans that I just like kind of slide my hand out. So I hurt my thumb just doing that repeatedly. And then I was like, okay, let's do another peak for nationals, and then did that for me. So yeah, that's how we've been working together. I guess he's been really good at like anything I wanted to do. He's been very supportive of. Instead of being like, you should just do powerlifting or something, I'd be like, hey, will you do this program? And he'll like do it. And even when my shoulders were like hurting from doing muscle ups on the rings or doing like clean and jerks and bench pressing and everything, he didn't ever tell me to stop doing any of those things. He just like helped me with shoulder mobility and maintenance and rehab and things. So yeah, it's been really awesome working with Stin. Like, he's super encouraging on meet days. And that's kind of what I really needed as a beginning athlete. I didn't need someone to tell me like what I'm doing wrong or anything. I just needed someone to say, good job, you're doing great. Whereas now I don't mind like a little more constructive feedback. But Stin was just really awesome from the first day I worked with him, and he's been really great like working with me on my programs for whatever my goals are.
Now, I do want to talk about your kind of multi-sport background and how you actually train and prep for these various events that it sounds like you're involved in. But before we do that, I want to turn to Ryan here and get him in on the conversation, because as someone who has now programmed 2 kind of peaking cycles for you, and where you've seen some really great success, Ryan, well, how do you actually, what does Brittney's programming look like? How do you actually, is she just following kind of what everybody else does under your kind of tutelage, or are you programming very, very specific things for her because of her, you know, her background and the other various things that she has going on? How do you actually program for Brittney?
I mean, when she's doing pure powerlifting, it was very much Stin system stuff, where it's, you know, higher intensity on most of the lifts, but accumulated volume over the week. But it really depends on, you know, what she's doing at that time, right? So I think even for Westerns, you're still doing CrossFit pretty frequently. You know, we had to kind of balance the volume with the recovery. Right now, she's prepping for Weightlifting Nationals, which is another challenge. For most of my athletes, I do week-by-week programming, so it allows me to keep track of their accumulated fatigue. So, you know, with Brittney, she has a very deep reserve for work capacity, much more so than most of my athletes. She's here at Moose Jaw again training, and she basically, besides the fact she shows up late most of the time, she's also the last one there, and I think she's usually there for hours and hours after. Like I think your workouts must be 3 or 4 hours long most days. So, you know, she can handle quite a bit of volume, but right now it's a matter of kind of balancing how much stress we're introducing with powerlifting versus how much she needs to be focusing more on weightlifting. But it is pretty, you know, it's mostly what I do with most of my athletes. It's very similar. So it's been challenging, but as a coach, I think it's more my job to adapt to what my athletes want. And at nationals, like after nationals at the banquet, Brittney came up to me and asked what she should do next or something, and if she should do weightlifting or something like that. And I'm like, well, you got to do what you love to do, because no one's getting paid for this. So if you don't love it, then you might as well, you know, not do it. So
Ryan, I like how you actually said that you adapt your programming with your athletes' kind of specific needs in mind, only because I think a lot of coaches try to conform their athletes to whatever their philosophies are or methodologies are, where there has to be a little bit more of a two-way street happening. You know, with respect to Brittney, it's like she doesn't need to specialize right now in one sport or the other, and she doesn't want to compete at a high level in 2 sports. So, you know, it's looking around how we can actually facilitate that goal. Brittney, I want to turn it back to you and just talk about some of your programming as it relates to weightlifting and powerlifting, and how you actually do that. Like, how do you actually implement some of your, because I know Ryan just does your powerlifting program, so how do you actually fit in your weightlifting programming? Like, what does that actually look like? Like, you know, from like a weekly standpoint, and then actually drilling down on each individual day. Do you do your powerlifting movements first, your weightlifting movements first? Like, how do you actually organize that? Because you're 2 weeks away from your weightlifting nationals.
Yeah. So honestly, it's a lot of trial and error, but so I think like I see myself as kind of a science experiment, and that's kind of how I do everything, whether it's nutrition, like whatever it is. If you just like control something, and you have some sort of hypothesis, and you like just try to keep some stuff the same but change other things and see what happens. So that's kind of how my training works. And I mean, I followed a bunch of different programs before. I wouldn't say I'm not really one of those program hoppers. Like, if I'm going to follow something, I'm going to follow it for long enough to see some results. So the way it works right now is I do my Olympic weightlifting first, because, I mean, that's what I'm focusing on for nationals. I want to perform really well there. So I want to be freshest when I'm hitting those lifts. I did follow before Westerns for weightlifting. I followed some programming from Synergy, from Chad Benko there. I followed his weightlifting program, and I really enjoyed that. So I actually ended up doing my own programming for weightlifting for this meet, so we'll see how I do. But I based it a lot off of what Chad does, because that last peak worked really well for me. I felt really strong going into Westerns, so I'm hoping for the same thing here. But we did add a little more volume with like the squats and the bench and the deadlift, because I feel like my body, I feel like I respond really well to volume. I get strong under volume. And so, yeah, I think we're going to switch it up after nationals here. We're probably going to do the powerlifting stuff first, and I'll do weightlifting at the end. And I'll keep the weightlifting a little lighter so that I can focus on my technique more, because, I mean, everyone I talk to when it comes to weightlifting, they say the numbers I should be lifting based on my strength are much higher than what I am lifting. So I know it's just technique and more practice, more the barbell I need. So, I mean, we'll shift more powerlifting focus, and I'll put in the weightlifting work at the end. But yeah, my training sessions are a little longer. They're high volume right now. That's what I like. But obviously, as I'm getting closer to the meet, they're not going to be as long as that, so that I'm ready.
I find like in weightlifting, you have these estimated 1 rep max calculations that are based on some of these core lifts. And there can be quite a discrepancy between what the estimated 1RM calculations say and what you actually are putting up on the platform. More of a discrepancy when you actually look on weightlifting versus powerlifting. I find that powerlifting estimated 1 rep maximums are more accurate when you go through some of the calculations. Do you think that's because weightlifting is more technical? Like, do you find that because you compete in both these sports, do you find that it is a little bit more technical to master these movements, like master the clean and jerk, master the snatch?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what it is, because I think, like, I know for me, I mean, you can look at me as an example, like, I was able to get good at powerlifting very quickly, and I mean, I think it takes pretty much just this time to become excellent at either sport, but I think it takes a lot longer to become good at weightlifting because of how technical the lifts are. So yeah, you're moving the heaviest weight possible from the floor to overhead in one movement in the snatch, and then to your shoulders, and then overhead in the clean and jerk. So it's like super technical. There's like a million things that could go wrong. There's so many things going through your head. I think the sumo deadlift is as close as it gets to that in powerlifting. Like, I remember when Stin was first trying to teach me to do that, I was like, I feel like I'm learning to snatch all over again. But I think that that's exactly why there's such a discrepancy between, like, so someone can look at my back squat, like the 40 kg back squat, and they'll tell me that I should be able to clean and jerk 100, whereas my best right now is like 84. So, I mean, there's a big gap there, and I think it's just time under the barbell. So I think I just need to spend like probably another year, 2 years, and then, yeah, I'll be hitting those numbers. But it's just the technical aspects of the lift. Like, I'm a strong lifter. I can't wait for the day when I show up weightlifting meet, and people are like, oh, she's such a beautiful technical lifter. Right now they're like, oh, she's definitely strong enough, and that's what they always say. So, yeah, I think that's what it is.
I really like what you said, how you actually have to consider yourself a scientist, and you actually have to just kind of control some variables of your training, and then, you know, change a few others, and make some conclusions, and continue to, you know, revamp your kind of philosophy a little bit, and continue to make hypotheses and test them, and so on and so forth. Because I find that that's like a very similar process from what we do as coaches as well sometimes you have these very, very difficult cases that don't fit the mold or don't fit what sports science says should work, and you kind of have to, you're not dealing with an athlete in a lab setting. You're dealing with an athlete in a real context, with real feelings and emotions and injuries and histories and experience. And so you kind of do have to act in a way as a coach, as a scientist, to kind of figure out what's going to work and why it's going to work. You want to find out the why so that you can continue to implement those things that are working. What do you guys think about that?
I definitely agree on that. I mean, like, you're gonna have you have different athletes, and everyone's gonna, react different to what they're giving you. And at times, you may think it's working extremely well, and you're gonna have to make changes to that eventually, right? So there's always gonna be changes, no matter what, and you have to just be able to adapt when the time comes, right?
I think that's what first really drew me to program design. Really, was that I just wanted to try things and experiment, and so I started pretty early on in my powerlifting trying to take the programs that Jeff Butt was making and modifying them for myself, and things I'd read online, toss them in and see how they worked for myself. And so it was always just experimenting on myself that kind of got into this, and then other people started trying my programs too. So I think it has to be desire to experiment and read and think about it. So
yeah, I agree with that too. And the biggest thing is, like, if something's working, you leave it in there and you keep it. And if something's not working over time, you're going to change that, right?
Brittney, what do you think about, I know you mentioned some of how you actually balance the two sports, weightlifting and powerlifting, but do you find that at some point you're going to run into some, like, diminishing returns? Like, you're going to run into some point in which, like, continuing to do one activity or putting priority on one activity is going to then negatively affect another aspect in the other sport. So what I'm trying to say is, like, an example here might be, like, would you say that, like, benching negatively, like, you want to increase your bench, you want to put up records on bench press, would you say that would negatively affect at some point, at some level, like, your ability to do, jerks overhead, because of perhaps some of the range of motion issues, you're too dominant in your pec sort of thing? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, you know what? I think that's something it's really interesting to think about, because what I've found actually is I did find before, when I was trying to do like CrossFit and powerlifting and weightlifting all at the same time, I was having a lot of shoulder issues just trying to move in all those different ranges of motions. And it didn't matter like how much shoulder mobility I did and everything. And even when I was following a different program and then Lynn would just do my bench days for me, like, we had an idea of, so we were going to try to do my bench days when I was doing a really heavy shoulder day. But what I found, and this is just that whole trial and error thing, is I found it works best if I actually do bench and do clean and jerks on the same day, because then my pecs aren't like tight and sore and fatigued when I'm going to do that overhead movement. It's like everything's just warm, everything's feeling good. So maybe I won't hit the same numbers at the end of the session that I would have been able to, but as long as you kind of know how to auto-regulate a little bit and stuff, I think that's okay. So I think there is going to be a point, like, I think actually what surprised me is, like, my overhead's been really good, but I think I'm having trouble getting my elbows up higher to catch a heavy clean because of my lats being really tight from benching and stuff. So, I think that's where it comes into play. Like, if I'm getting ready for a weightlifting meet, I'm just going to cut back on the benching probably a little more in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, right? So that when it gets to meet day, I can catch that clean really well. But yeah, like, over time they're gonna affect each other. And then when I'm focusing on powerlifting, I'll probably do less overhead stuff, right? And we'll just work on that, and it'll be that trial and error thing. So yeah, I think, like, I'm probably not gonna be the best in the world at either if I'm trying to do both, but I think I can definitely, like, keep improving at both as long as we just pay attention to how my body's responding and everything.
Man, that's a great example. Do you have any other examples of that, like in terms of your training template, where you might not structure one exercise on a certain day or one protocol or another? Like, I just feel like that would be really beneficial for some of our listeners to hear, and your experience, your trial and error experience.
Another thing that I was thinking, and this is a silly thing, but we decided to do your heavier back squats on the day you're doing power movements, so you can wear your SBDs the whole time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is like, so my SBD knee sleeves are so tight that I find they make me slow going into the hole if I'm trying to catch at like a true receiving position for an Olympic lift. So like if I'm trying to snatch or I'm trying to clean and jerk, you'll see some of the top athletes, like a lot of people from Great Britain, they're all lifting in SBDs. But I feel like because like my strength is so much higher than my skill level at weightlifting right now, I'm not catching heavy enough weights that I really need that help out of the hole yet. And so I just find it slows me down. Like when I'm wearing those really tight knee sleeves, I have trouble pulling into the hole. So yeah, we've shifted my training. We didn't have it like this at the beginning, but so on my day I do power snatches, that's the day I do heavy back squats because I am still low bar squatting. So that's maybe another interesting thing to mention is like some weightlifters will think that you shouldn't be low bar squatting if you're doing weightlifting. But I had a conversation with Chad Banco, and he's like, you just see yourself as, if you're trying to do both these sports, you need to see yourself as a chameleon, and you need to be able to just jump back and forth between different movement patterns. And so I do the heavy squat day on the day I do my power snatch day so that I can have my SBDs on to go into the low bar back squats. It's just a simple thing that I wouldn't have been able to do those squats maybe the same way, practicing in the same equipment that I would use at a meet if we didn't make that change. So that's something really simple, I guess.
Just out of curiosity, like, so how often, that was cool that you mentioned that, because I know obviously like low bar doesn't have as much transfer as the high bar, right, to like Olympic weightlifting. So like how often would you be like low bar squatting versus high bar squatting, and like leading up to a meet, would you be like cutting out that low bar squatting or still keeping that in to handle some like heavier loads, or like how would you go by that?
Yeah, so I used to cut it out entirely. Like before, I would honestly just switch to low bar before a powerlifting meet, and I would do high bar all the time. And I think that was probably better when I was a beginning athlete because I wanted to rehearse that movement pattern. But yeah, when Chad said that one day, it just really clicked in my head. Like, yeah, I should be able to just switch moving in different ways. Someone commented to me too, like, I don't do any conventional deadlifting right now. I just do sumo deadlifting. And so every time I'm doing a clean or a snatch or something, I'm pulling from that conventional stance already. So there's not really any point in adding extra conventional deadlifting. So I can do the sumo deadlift, and I mean, I'm just doing that a lot because I'm not very good at it, and I just did it for the first time. My first meet was nationals, and I didn't know how bad I was at it when I first started, but it's getting a lot better. So the main reason I thought we would just do that a lot was so I could get better at it, but then someone else looked at my program and they're like, yeah, that was a really smart idea. You don't need to be pulling from a conventional stance any more than you are. So we do a lot of, I guess, speed pulls with deadlifts because I'm doing a ton of pulling volume already. So we don't need to push the weight super heavy. We're doing some like pause work too so that I can work on positioning in the sumo deadlift because I don't think my problem there is really strength. It's just technical. I need to learn that movement better. And so Stin's helping me with that, and that's another thing in my program too.
That's so, and that makes a lot of intuitive sense to me. That in weightlifting, you're so you're pull dominant. You're just pulling things off the floor, and that's the entire training program essentially, or at least like a big chunk of it. And so, not actually going in and doing heavy conventional pulls, that would make intuitive sense to me. And then when you're actually doing your deadlifting variations, they're there to work positional aspects of the movement to make sure that your technique is becoming more refined. So that's really cool to hear.
One thing you said that I kind of I liked was that you kind of understand that being a multi-sport athlete, you may not be able to achieve the same level in both as you may be able to in just if you were a unisport athlete. And I know, like, I've told people in the past, and I think I've hurt some feelings because of the fact that I'm like, you can do multi-sport, and at the time it was, I can't remember if it was powerlifting and strongman or something like that, but the reality to me is that if you want to do multi-sport, you're probably not going to achieve the same level as if you were going to be a single sport athlete. There's very few people who can master more than one sport. So I think it's good that you kind of recognize that and accept it. And maybe down the road you'll decide, hey, no, I want to do weightlifting at the highest level I can, or you want to do powerlifting at the highest level you can. But right now you're enjoying doing both, and you're improving doing both.
Brittney, what are some of your goals moving into nationals? So it's in 2 weeks from now, and it's in Vancouver. You've had probably about 2.5, 3 months to train for this after powerlifting nationals. What are some of your goals for weightlifting?
Yes, I'm actually super excited for this meet. I feel like this is the first meet probably since my very first weightlifting meet or my very first powerlifting meet where I really feel like it's kind of just me against me because let's be honest, like I got in with just the minimum qualifying standards, so I'm just going there to make the best weightlifters in Canada look like the best weightlifters in Canada. So I'm just excited to go and one thing I found in weightlifting more so than powerlifting is in weightlifting, I can go and I could probably open with something higher than what I've hit in training because I don't know what it is about a weightlifting meet, but I'm just a platform lifter when it comes to those days. So what I want to do at this meet is like open with probably like the highest thing I've hit in training and
Wow.
just like see what's in me because I always like my third snatch is still a power snatch, so I'm not catching it in the hole. So I know there's still like more in the tank. So I want to just kind of push it, and I feel like every great lifter has a bomb out meet, and I feel like this is a perfect opportunity if I'm ever gonna have one. So I just want to like push and see what's capable and have some fun and like put up some good numbers, hopefully some PRs. But I want to see what I can really do when I open as high as I think I can based on past competition experience compared to what I hit in training.
It's so interesting to hear that even though you've now or you're going to be competing at 2 national level events in 2 different sports, that you actually have 2 different mentalities as you go into the event. You're not taking some of those powerlifting principles and applying them. That's really interesting. I know we're kind of bouncing around back and forth, but as you were talking there, I was thinking that some of my friends who are involved in weightlifting, who are getting older, they're actually crossing over and doing powerlifting. And seeing some success in powerlifting. Do you find that when you're hanging out at these events and you're at these high-level weightlifting events that the crowd and the athletes, when I say crowd, I mean athletes, like do you find that it's a younger population that is doing it? Because when I look at powerlifting meets, I find that like you do get older athletes, open athletes, like into your mid-30s and late 30s, who are seeing some incredible success and making our national team, so to speak. But you wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, you would know better than I, you would see that in weightlifting, that sort of same kind of age discrepancy.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot more like kids weightlifting programs and stuff out there too than there's powerlifting, and I think you guys might know, like I think there's like rules on that or something, but so you'll see the little tiny kids going up and lifting like super light weights and it's really cute. But I mean, I think in general the community is just a lot smaller for weightlifting. Like it hasn't seen the explosive growth that powerlifting has. And I've chatted with a few people about like maybe the reasons behind that. Like maybe it is just it's harder. You can't just walk up and like snatch a bar really well, whereas I mean, you can do some kind of bench press and you can do some kind of squat. It might not be the prettiest thing, right? But so I think it is just a smaller community. Maybe it is a bit younger, but I don't know. I think just in general, I would say it's smaller, I guess.
Yeah, the technical threshold to get involved is far less in powerlifting. I would definitely agree with you on that.
I was gonna say, and equipment-wise, like not many commercial gyms out there can you do a snatch without getting kicked out, right? Because you're probably using steel plates on a non-rotating barbell, and you probably don't have a platform to do it on. So, most commercial gyms don't even put up with deadlifting, let alone someone putting a bar over their head and maybe dropping it extra loud. That would scare everyone on the treadmills. So.
Brittney, I'm going to ask you a taboo question, and I already I preemptively told you what I want to ask before we come on the podcast. You had agreed to share maybe some of your experiences on this topic. In studies in university, you often read about how the sample population is typically like young men, and there's not a lot of studies out there on young women. And one of the reasons for this is because there's a lot more hormonal sorts of variables when women are going through their menstruation cycle. How do you find that to affect your training? I know that you actually said that you're going to try some new things, some new research, some new principles that is kind of coming out in terms of how to actually structure your intensities and volumes around your menstruation cycle. How do you actually plan to do that? And who's helping you with that?
Yeah, I'm actually super excited to talk about that. So I've been doing some research on that, and this is another reason. I don't know if you guys all follow me on Facebook or Stin, but I posted earlier last week about how I wanted to nominate Stin for the Coach of the Year award, and I think this would be another reason. So I just I messaged him on the weekend because I had a conversation with one of my friends about ways that you could improve your training, because I'm all about I think after you've been in the sport for a while, if you want to really become the best, you have to start measuring as many things as you can. So I have a sleep tracking app now, sleep cycle that I use. I weigh and measure my food. I'm always trying to optimize. And so
soon you'll be using mystrengthbook.com.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that too, so you can talk more about that as well. But yeah, so I was really interested in knowing, I've noticed throughout a woman's menstrual cycle, all women will know, you'll have days where you just don't feel really good in the gym, and trying to hit the weights you're supposed to is a huge challenge. And then there'll be other days where you just feel amazing and you're like, I want to throw more weight on the bar, but you're looking at your program and it tells you this number, so you're like, I guess I got to stay at that number. And so there's been some recent studies. There was one in 2014. I think the scientist is E. Sung or something. And this scientist and the people that they worked with looked up basically how they could structure periodization around a woman's cycle. And so they compared basically the follicular cycle with the luteal cycle. And so they tried to push things in so a woman's cycle starts, the first day is when she gets her period. And then about the first, until she ovulates, that's the follicular cycle. And in that time, her luteinizing hormone is increasing and her progesterone is lowest. So really what's interesting is that, so whenever I talk to women about testosterone or anything like that, they get kind of scared and they're like, oh, that's a male hormone. But the reality is that we have that too, and it should be your best friend. If you are a woman, you should be, that's why I'm so crazy about my sleep and stuff, is because I want my testosterone levels to be as high naturally as possible so that I can get as strong as possible. And so during your cycle, there's going to be times when your testosterone and your and all that is at its highest levels. And so that's basically, they found when you're ovulating. So that's about 14 days into your cycle. So right around there, if you can be pushing your training harder, your recovery is going to be better. You're going to be able to hit better numbers and everything like that. And then once you've ovulated, progesterone starts to increase. And then your testosterone levels and all of that is going to go down. So you're not going to be feeling as good in the gym. So there's kind of 10 days after that ovulation where you're just not going to be able to hit numbers as well and different things like that. So I've asked Stin if we can kind of work on this and try to structure my programming around it, volumes and intensities and everything. And he's like, yep, I might as well try it. So I'm really excited about that.
So the take-home message is to go for PRs during your ovulation phase.
Exactly, yeah, and really interesting. Right. So you can find out when you're ovulating by measuring your body's temperature in the morning. And if you do that every day and you notice an increase, so you should notice an increase for 3 to 5 days in your body temperature, anywhere from 0.3 degrees Celsius to even 1 degree Celsius. And that's when you're ovulating, and that's when you can push it in the gym a little harder.
Men actually do have a hormonal cycle. I think it's actually a 35-day cycle instead of a 28-day cycle, but I haven't done a ton of research on it. Okay. But there's actually a men. There's a hormonal cycle for men. I've never read much about it, but.
You guys have high testosterone levels all the time, so.
I know, especially if you're bald. Abby, baldness is a sign of high testosterone. Did you know that?
Man, I'm gonna join you in that. Just 2 more years, buddy.
Can't wait till I start balding.
Brittney, can you tell us a little bit about just in wrapping up here? Can you tell us a little bit about your business and some of the various ventures and projects you have on the go? It's kind of an interesting business called Idealistic Isabel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, and maybe just go into the name a little bit as well, so we understand why that is?
Why it's not something, Brittney?
Yeah, for sure. So, my business started as a blog. So I've always really, I guess not always, I realized a few years ago that I wanted to be a writer, and so now I've kind of come to terms with whenever I have that someday I want to do this, it's just okay, I should just start doing it now, because there's never going to be a perfect time. So that's kind of what happened with my blog. It's I just got to start writing. I want to write books and everything, but it's you need more practice, right? So when I was coming up with ideas for my blog name, I was just asking everybody around me, and people were like, oh, alliteration is cool, or like, what about the things that are like blank and blank? So the options were either I came up with Idealistic Isabel or Deadlifts and Dynamism. So I went with Idealistic Isabel, and the reason I chose that is because, I mean, I think idealism it's like my biggest virtue and also my biggest vice. I mean, I think it's something that's helped me see a lot of success in my life, like whether it's in sports or everything, because I always have these big lofty dreams, and I believe that like we can achieve things if we push ourselves really hard. So I mean, that gets me in trouble with some things, but not very often. And I chose Isabel actually because it's the name of a CrossFit workout. It's 30 snatches for time. So just went with alliteration there. And I mean, I thought like maybe some CrossFitters would recognize that, but even if they didn't, it's like alliteration is cool, whatever. This is a woman's name, and I'm all about empowering women as well. And I mean, I don't know, I didn't want to just go with my own name. So what I do in my business is I kind of have like 3 main programs. So the first one is my nutrition program. It's a 14-week program. And all of my programs, what they have in common is I want to help people grow in all aspects of their being. So I believe like we're kind of 4-part beings. And as I mentioned, I'm in a First Nations community. And one thing I really admire is a lot of the stories and the spirituality that First Nations people have. And one of the lessons is the medicine wheel, so that we're a 4-part being. So we're physical. And I think in Western society, we spend a lot of time in the physical and mental of our being, but we forget that there's like also an emotional and a spiritual aspect. So I kind of hit people with what they want in my program. So if you want abs or if you want to get stronger or whatever, I'm going to give you that. But I'm also going to challenge you to set goals in these other areas and work towards that. So my nutrition program is a 14-week program. It's not just macronutrient coaching. That is part of it. But I also take people through different habits like nutrient timing, so how to time your nutrition around your workouts. We talk about sleep. Like I said, I like nerding out and optimizing everything. So I used to be a science teacher, so I kind of still do that in that way. So that's what my nutrition program's like. And then I also do some custom programming for people. Now it's mostly people who are in their garage or at their house or at a global gym, and they just like want to get strong or want to get fit. So I don't work with a ton of like elite athletes or anything like that. But I do have one girl who's like wanting to bulk up and gain muscle right now, so that's really fun for me. And then I also do a program called Project Possible, which is named after the podcast that I do. And that is more of like a sort of goal setting, goal attainment program. So the purpose of that program is to help people achieve their big goals and dreams, but also to get more enjoyment out of their day-to-day life. So those are the things that I do with my business.
Sounds like a very holistic approach to coaching, which I think is how do I say it? Not as valued. You know, some of those aspects, as you said, are not as valued or not seen as important. But it sounds like you kind of put equal emphasis on each of those components. You actually are writing an ebook right now, are you not? Can you talk a little bit about the ebook that you're writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm finished writing the ebook. I'm just waiting to get it back from my graphic designer. So I actually just it's called Your Last Nutrition Program. So it's a 14-week guide to getting results. So basically it is my nutrition program put into an ebook, and then I also share case studies from different clients, the results that they've achieved on my program. And then I include different things in there. So as you mentioned, like I think in the past, the holistic approach hasn't been valued, but I do have clients coming over from different programs who are looking for something more, because I think if you neglect the emotional aspect, like people do emotionally eat. I mean, that's part of it, right? And I'm not an expert on that, but at least I'm starting to look into it and investigate things like that. So that's what my ebook is. It's my whole 14-week program. So I mean, I'll teach you how to set your own macros in a really easy way, because I think people are interested but sometimes afraid to commit to a program. I'll also teach you like how to time your nutrition around your workouts, how much vegetables and fiber you should get in a day, a guideline on how much water you should maybe be drinking, how to improve your sleep. I have 14 different habits, and that's all included in my ebook with some case studies and different stuff like that. But you'll be able to find it on my website. My website is just idealisticisabel.com, and Isabel is Isabel, and it should be up there, I hope, within the next couple of weeks for sure.
When you actually do your public release for your ebook, you're going to give away some copies to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm going to give away 3 copies. So However you guys want to set that up, we'll do some kind of draw. And you guys will be the only people who get my ebook for free, so that'll be exciting.
Brittney, we want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I actually learned quite a bit about training for multi-sport events, and we really appreciate you sharing your insights. So
thanks, guys. I'll have to have you on my show so I can ask you all the questions I wanted to ask you as well.
Okay, thanks, Brittney.
Sounds great.
Thanks,
All right, we're going to thank Brittney Bergen for coming on the podcast. Go to our website, www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. Brittney was nice enough to give away her 14-week ebook to 3 lucky people. That will include more of a holistic approach to her her training, nutrition, macros, and also sleep patterns as well. So go to the website, get your names in, and that's all for this week.
This episode was brought to you by LVD Fitness, where LVD stands for Lift, Visualize, and Dominate. Visit lvdfitness.com to pick up your CPU-approved swag and follow them at LVD Fitness to find out which events they're coming to near you and to catch a sneak peek of their spring collection. You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Abby Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.